right, here we are up to chapter 13 of Girlcott by Florenz Webbe Maxwell. When I awoke the next morning, I threw off my top sheet and hopped over to the open window. The morning breeze was fresh and already perfumed with the scent of honeysuckle that wafted up from the hedge nearby. In the ponciana tree, a kiskadee flew through the flamboyant red flowers, chirping away merrily. My mood was heightened by the smell of the cake Mama was baking for my block party tomorrow. She was also singing her favorite hymn, "Oh Jesus, I Have Promised," off key at that, to the more melodious clatter of pots and pans. Now and then, Papa's deep voice mingled with Mama's singing, then laughter. The warm breeze encircled my entire body, and I threw back my head and inhaled the pungent freshness. This was my last day to be 15, and already I could feel the celebration in the air. The clock on my side table clasped its hands at 6:40, as if giving a blessing to the minutes as she ticked them off. Before Eileen went home last night, she and I spent most of the time telephoning classmates to tell them of the change of plans. It was important that they were informed in advance that I was having a block party and was later going to the boycott. This change of plan was more exciting than seeing Yul Brynner in the Buccaneer, and I was certain that my classmates would be enthusiastic as well. I was so anxious to get to school before the first bell rang that I dashed out of the house before the sun had dried up the early morning dew. When Papa saw me in such a hurry, he offered to give me a ride, but since this was my last day to walk to school, I declined. By next Monday, I would be licensed to ride my mobilette, so why not stroll down the North Shore Road and soak up the scenery on the eve of my 16th birthday? The fresh, fishy smell of the ocean made me slow down and gaze at the wide blue field of water. It was so calm that I had an urge to step on its surface, walk over to the horizon and touch the fluffy cloud that hung just above the line. Then suddenly this tranquility seemed like a mockery, for all I could think about was the boycott that had appeared out of nowhere, threatening to turn my whole life upside down and uncovering an ugly side of my island I had never seen before. Although I dragged my feet along the dusty road that led to school, the first bell had not yet rung and several students were strolling across the field. I joined them and was surprised to see Eileen standing at the top of the step waving a paper that was folded in her hand. "Are you taking names of late students before they are designated late?" I asked, for she did look out of place standing in the prefect's spot waving the paper at me. Instead of answering, she grabbed my hand and drew me inside the school, down the corridor, and into the library. Before I could ask what this drama was about, she shut the door and leaned on it. "Look at this." She thrust the paper in my hand. I looked at her and then down at the paper, not unfolding it. "What's this about? What's going on?" "Look at it." She spoke through clenched teeth, and when I looked at her, I saw fiery anger in her eyes. I quickly unfolded the paper and spread it out. All I deciphered was a list of names with crosses beside most of them. "I went home last night and made a list of all the people we called about the block party," she explained while I was still trying to figure out what this was all about. "So I came to school early this morning. Some people were here, so I asked them to put a tick against their names if they were coming to the block party. When the others came, I made them do the same." "I just see 2 ticks, some crosses." "That's just it," she interrupted. "The 2 people who confirmed, Dedrick Smith and Hugh Hawkins, of course, the 2 class clowns." My voice sounded flat, as if coming from under a rock. "The others said that they want to come, but their parents are still worried about the boycott." Eileen's words seemed to crush my insides into a tight ball so that I could barely breathe. "Let's go to the classroom," I said when my normal voice returned. "I want them to tell me to my face why they can't come. Their parents were willing to let them to go to the segregated theater that insults colored people. Nobody knew about the boycott then." "Well, we know now." "I don't think you should try to confront them now." Eileen was holding onto my arm, trying to restrain me. I shook her off. "Why not?" She sighed, then answered my question. "Mr. Lewis has called a meeting of the head boy, head girl, and the prefects." "So?" I was not in the mood for my friend's strange behavior. "There won't be anyone in the room to keep order." "That's why. And you should see the mood the class is in." I shrugged her off, walked up to the classroom, and flung the door wide open. When I entered, all eyes fastened on me. I felt like a worn pincushion and just as prickly. The first person to jump from her desk was Bella. "We were just talking about you," she said in a voice that belonged to in a funeral parlor. "We're sorry about your not getting the scholarship." "All through that progressive group and their stupid boycott," somebody in the back of the room said. I marched up to the front of the class and leaned on the teacher's desk. Since the first bell had not rung, I did not concern myself with class protocol, and as I expected, all bodies swung around and faced me. I noticed that Eileen had not followed me into the room, so I knew she was sulking because I had not listened to her. I had no idea how I was going to begin, but I did know I was going to tell them why I had changed my mind to have a block party and why I felt it was important to support the theater boycott. I cleared my throat 3 times, stared around the room, not really registering faces in my nervousness. This was more difficult than I thought. Looking down, I prayed I would not fall over Charity Lamb, who sat at the front desk. I knew she wouldn't be interested in my block party. To my surprise, I heard her whisper, "Speak from her heart, Desma." I stared at her circular face with the big fleshy mole near her nose. She was smiling and nodding. This small act of encouragement coming from one of the quietest girls in the class made me take a deep breath and plunge into my monologue. "I'm sorry I had to disappoint you by canceling my old party plans at the last minute." I paused as I looked around the room. All eyes were staring straight at me. This further encouraged me to continue with a bolder voice. "So much has happened in the past few days. There is no way I can have an ordinary party and act as if I don't know that there is a boycott taking place. What the progressive group hopes to accomplish affects you and me. My parents don't want to support the progressive group. Mine think the boycott's dangerous. Those progressive group people are sneaky communists. Let Desma finish." Eileen walked into the room and stood beside me. Soon there was silence. She turned to me, smiled, and said, "Go on, Desma. I know that segregation has hit you hard with that scholarship business. You, more than any of us, have a right to support the progressive group. Before you came to school, I mentioned that other things have happened to you as well. I didn't go into details, but we would like to know if you don't mind telling us." I should have been annoyed with Eileen, but I wasn't, because she did open up the opportunity for me to let the class learn that segregation was not only my problem, but theirs as well. I told them what happened at the Wallaces and Papa's encounter with Mr. Townsend. The part about my grandfather was difficult, but I did tell that story, and along with it, my Papa not being able to vote, even though his property is valuable enough. Before I could continue, Bella jumped to her feet and said in her usual prim voice, "You've gone on and on about what happened to your family and what happened to you." She paused, looked around the room in an oldie-goldie imitation, and then turned back to me. This was not a good omen. "My father can vote. He's one of the few colored people whose property has not been devalued, and that's because we are important colored people. You should check and find out why your family doesn't fit in with the status quo." The class gasped. Eileen threw her shoulders back and balled her fist. "I don't know what you're getting at," I said quickly, knowing that Eileen was itching to confront Bella. "Aren't you and your family segregated like the rest of us?" I could tell by the expressions on the faces in front of me that Bella had gone too far. She ignored my question and continued, speaking slowly, enunciating each word. "We have no idea who those progressive people are. They can be riffraffs for all we know. My father is not supporting any group stirring up trouble undercover, particularly a group that's encouraging us Bermudians to disturb the peace." "Who is your father?" Dedrick demanded. There was snickering from the back of the room. "Yeah, we want to know who he is," shouted Hugh. The snickering became an outburst. The old Desma would have sat down, but there was no way I was going to let Bella get the upper hand, particularly since the class was beginning to get restless. "Push her back in her seat," Eileen said. "She's got the nerve." Bella captured my attention as she walked directly towards Hugh, poked her finger in his chest, and shouted, "My father is Lincoln Washington Smith, MCP. "Oh, you mean the monkey climbing pawpaw tree?" said Hugh, stepping backwards and bowing. "MCP for short?" Bella's eyes all but popped off her face when she heard the class laughing, and Hugh began chanting, "Monkey climbing pawpaw tree, look and see. Monkey climbing pawpaw tree, look and see. monkey climbing pawpaw tree, look and see. The class joined in the chant, and Bella looked around, her eyes brimming with tears. She fled from the room, her maids in waiting close on her heels. Eileen doubled over with laughter and limped back to her desk. I didn't like Bella, but I didn't enjoy the scene. The laughter and chants reminded me of the Wallaces. Actuary. As wants to be an actuary, ma'am. The image of Almira's grinning face popped in front of mine. I shuddered, looked quickly at the chanting class, and then walked over to my desk, raised the lid, and let it slam hard. The sound silenced the chanting and scattered the noise to silence. Determined to let them understand the importance of supporting the boycott, I walked back to the desk. I was about to open my mouth when I became aware that Hugh and Dedrick were elbowing each other, preparing to further entertain the class. A few people around them began to giggle. This was my last opportunity to convince the whole lot of them that the boycott was important. If I sat down in defeat, their last impression would be of the two clowns entertaining them and Bella leaving the room in humiliation. I moved forward with my arms tightly folded for courage. My voice came out sharp and crisp. The boycott isn't a joke, and we have to take it seriously. A couple of days ago, you all congratulated me for excelling in the Oxbridge external exam and qualifying for the Empire Scholarship. Who would have thought that would change? My voice began to quiver, and I felt a lump of tears in my throat. Taking a deep breath, I swallowed and continued. We have to support the progressive group. My voice broke. The class was now attentive, everyone looking in my direction, including the two clowns. Tell them about your block party, Eileen said, coming back to stand beside me. She took my hand and squeezed it. Thanks, I whispered, squeezing back. I'll be having a block party instead of an ordinary birthday party. After the party, we can all go to the boycott and... Just the class? Dedrick interrupted. Oh, no. I thought, wondering what chant was going to come from my explanation. But he had surprised me by saying, I think a block party is a great idea, but I want to know who's included. After what you told us about your family and all that, you should invite everybody in Bermuda. A snicker came from somewhere in the middle of the room. Before I could respond to his question, Hugh said, I remember my father talking about a brother who lost his house because he spoke out about something. They never talked about it when I was around, so I don't know the details. To my astonishment, his face lacked the clownish grin. My aunt's a nurse in England. She left here because of segregation, said Charity, her voice barely above a whisper. My father says when we meet on Judgment Day, all sins will be punished. Before anyone else could respond, George entered the room. He began to clap. Bravo, Desma. We're behind you 100%. Thanks for opening our eyes. Lori had also entered the room, and she too began clapping. Thanks for your support, I said, and everyone rose to their feet and began applauding. The first bell rang. Ignoring it, Eileen announced, I will pass the list around again for you to put a tick beside your name. Remember, it's the party first and the boycott afterwards. Give me the list after school dismisses. When school finally dismissed for the day, Eileen and I did not check the list until we were nearly on Loquat Lane. We had decided to go through the names when we were away from everybody. Reaching my gate, she slowly pulled the paper out of her blouse pocket and dramatically handed it over to me. My hands gave a quick flutter of excitement, for I was anxious to see how the list had grown as a result of my speech. I unfolded the paper and looked at it. What's wrong? Eileen's voice seemed to be traveling from a distance. Before I could recover, she snatched it from my hand. It's just the same as before, she said, handing it back to me. The only two ticks are beside the names of Dedrick and Hugh. Actually, they put an extra tick beside their names. Nothing else has changed. Looks like my block party will end up being a backyard one. I tried not to sound as depressed as I was feeling. We'll need more than a backyard for those two clowns, Eileen said, putting her arms around my shoulder as we walked up to the gate. No matter how desperate I am, I don't want those clowns to monopolize my party. Looks like there's nothing more we can do. I agreed. I had run out of ideas.